Today's Daf Yomi is Kesubos Daf Chavtes, Kesubos 29. And today's Daf Yomi, we begin the third chapter, the glorious chapter known as Elu Naros. And as a background to this chapter, we know that in Sefer Shemos and Sefer Devarim refers to two types of incidents. In Sefer Shemos, refers to a virgin who is seduced. She's called Mefateh. A man seduces her. So then the halacha is, if she's a virgin and she's a nara, Shemar tells us is somebody between the age of 12 and 12 and a half, then the man who does this either has to marry her or pay the father 50 silver coins, shkalim. In addition to that, there's also an anusa. This is a woman who is assaulted by a man. And so such a person has to either marry or has to marry and pay the 50 silver coins. That's listed in Devarim. So the Mishnah begins on the top of Chavtes Samad Aleph. Elu Naros sheyesh lein kanas. These are the Naros. Rashi says it has to be specifically a Nara. A Nara is from when she started to have two genitalia hairs until she becomes an adult. And that takes place, this period of adolescence takes place over 6 months. 6 months between Naros and Bagros. When she's an adult, she's called a Bogeres. When she's a child, she's called a Katana. So a Nara is in between. So Rashi says that according to our Mishnah, the Katana and the Bogeres do not get a Knas. These are the only ones who get this penalty, the payment of the 50 silver coins to their father is the Nara. So Elu Nara Sheish. These are the naros. If they were assaulted, a person gives to the father 50 silver coins. Habal Mamzeres, one who has relations with the Mamzeres. The Mamzeres' father will get this 50 silver coins. Nasina, Valakusis, or somebody has relations with the Nesina. Nesina is these were the Givonim who came in the time of Joshua. And the verse uses the word Vayitneim Yoshua, so therefore they're called Nesina. And so their status is unclear. But so one should not marry them. These are people you're not supposed to marry. Or al-kusis, the Rashi says these were geirei arayos. Again, their conversions were suspicious. So therefore, for this reason, this is a kusis. Therefore, for this reason, Rashi includes them within the prohibition of people you're not allowed to marry. And so the Mamzeres and the Sina and the Kusis were people who you're not allowed to marry. So, but if you assault them, Mishnah still says that you pay the fine. Then the Mishnah lists Habal, Gioris, Val Shvuy, Val Shivcha, Sheniftu, Sheniskar, V'nishtachru, Pechusas, Mibnel Shalol Shanim. If a man assaulted a convert who converted under the age of 3, or somebody who was a freed slave under the age of 3, or somebody had relations, and the reason why it has to be under the age of 3 is because the age of 3, we assume that somebody who's not living with the Jewish people, that their virginity was compromised. But if they came to the Jewish people under the age of 3, then the Gemara tells us that the Pesuim is Chosrim. The Gemara tells us in Nida, Memhei Amid Aleph, that if Rahman al-San, a girl is assaulted under the age of 3, her virginity will return by the time she turns 3. So in all those cases, these people get the Knas. The father of these girls gets the Knas. And so the reason why the Gioris, the Mamzeres, and the Gioris and the Shifcha that were redeemed, the reason why that has to be under the age of 3 is because if it was over the age of 3, we can't assume that they were virgins anymore. Now the Mishnah tells us the categories of people with whom there's a penalty for kares. So it's the Mishnah states, if a person has relations with his sister, or his father's sister, his mother's sister, his wife's sister, his brother's wife, his father's brother's wife, Nida, or a Nida woman, a menstrual woman, Yesham Knas. All these people, you have to pay the Knas. And Achal Pi Shein Hikares, even though they're in the category of Kares, even though the penalty for being with any of these women is the Kares penalty, which is death from the heavenly court, which is a death from Shemayim, Ein B'hem Misas Bezdin. Nevertheless, these people, they're not getting death from a court below. And so therefore, this is hinting to the topic which we haven't yet formally introduced. This is the topic of Kimle B'derabimine, Kamle B'derabimine, which means that if you have two penalties that you're liable for, we only give you the more severe penalty and not the minor penalty. And so therefore, for this reason, our mission is of the position that if the more severe penalty is a penalty that's from divine justice and not human justice, then we will give you the kinas. It's only if there will be justice from the court below that we'll say you're getting a more severe penalty and not giving you the kinas, the fine. So the Gemara addresses this question. The Gemara says, Hani naras psulos islu kinas kasheroslo. The Gemara says, first of all, these naros, the first category, these are all disqualified women. I mean to say only these disqualified women get the kinas for their father, but the kasheros women don't? Who are the disqualified women? Only the mamzeres, the nesina, the kusis, they're the only ones who get the kinas, but the kasheros women, but the woman is just a regular Yiddish girl, she doesn't get the kinas? So the Gemara says no. This is what our Mishnah means. These are the disqualified women who do get the kinas. These are the disqualified women who do get the kinas. Meaning, say the kosher women also get the kinas, but these are the ones who are disqualified who also do. And you'll see why on Amabeis, the distinctions about the type of women who are prohibited and the nature of the prohibitions. So the Gemara first comments, and the Gemara says, the naros get knas, the girls between the age of 12 and 12 and a half, they get the knas, but katana lo, but if she's a child, she does not get the knas. Ma'antana, who is the author of our Mishnah, who says that nara in Kitana lo, the young girl gets the knas, but not the nara gets knas, but not the katana. Rabbi Meir. This is the position of Rabbi Meir. The Tanya, Rabbi Meir is on the position. Kitana mibas yom echad v'ad shetavi shtei sayros. Kitana is from a girl is considered a katana from 1 day old until she goes through puberty, brings forth 2 hairs, and from that point, yesh al mecher ve'ela knas. At that point, biblically speaking, according to the Torah, the father has the right to sell off the girl. The father has the right to sell her off to be a slave, but he does not get the fine if somebody assaults her. So from when she's born, basically 1 day old until she brings forth the 2 hairs, the father can sell her as a slave, but she doesn't get the penalty. But when she brings forth 2 hairs, until she becomes an adult, i.e., we already said that 6-month period, the father gets the punitive damage, and if she's assaulted, that the father collects the 50 silver coins. But the father is no longer allowed to sell her. And the reason why the father can't sell her is because it's a kal chomer. If she had been sold and then unmarried by the age of 12, she automatically goes free. And so how can you sell her when she reaches the age of 12? So that's how the Gemara in Erechim learns it out. So, and when that's the position of Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir's position is that the child, you don't get the knas for the katana, but only for the nara. So that's the position of Rabbi Meir, and that's consistent with our Mishnah. Rabbi Meir says wherever there's knas, wherever there's mecher, there's no kanas. Wherever there's kanas, there's no mecher. So wherever she could be sold, the father doesn't get the damages, and wherever the father collects the penalty, he can't sell her. The Chachamim Omer, whereas the Chachamim argue, the Chacham say, Ketana, Mibashal Hashan of Yom Echad, V'ad Shetibager. He said, the Chachamim say, a Ketana, this minor girl, is from 3 years old, and one day, until she becomes an adult, yesh la kanas. So the Chachamim say no, that even though she's a ketana, she could get a kanas, but only starting at the age of 3. So our Mishnah says she only gets the kanas as a nara, that the father gets the kanas as a nara. But the Chachamim say no, even from the age of 3 on, her father collects the kanas. And so the Gemara asked about this kinas in mecher. Oh, you mean to say she can only get the kinas then, but her father can't sell her? Ema, no, we read it as af kinas b'makom mecher. No, even she gets also the kinas also while she's able to be sold. Meaning to say she can be sold from the age of 1 until the age of 12, age of 1 day old until the age of 12, but she can only collect the kanas from the age of 3 onward. And then the Gemara asks that the Mishnah says that the Mishnah had said that these girls have a kanas. The Gemara asked the question, V'amai, because the Gemara asked the question, V'hani b'nei kanasaninu? Do these categories, these disqualified women, the mamzeres, for example, are they capable of getting a kanas? V'amai, ikri kan. Why don't we recite the verse which states Velosi el isha? It says after the man assaults her, he has to marry her. It says and velo, and to him she will be his wife. Isha Rulilo, so Isha Rulilo has to be capable of marrying her, but he's not allowed to marry a mamzeres. So how do we pay the kanas to a mamzeres? This girl who's a mamzer when you're not allowed to marry her. So the Gemara explains 2 opinions. One is the opinion of Reish Lakish, and then there's the opinion of Rav Papa. And in the end, the Gemara combines the 2. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara explains, Amar Reish Lakish, Nara, Nara, Hanara. It says about the Anusa in the Devarim, it uses the words Nara and Hanara. And since the Hey of Nara is extra, so the Gemara counts it as 3 times it mentions the word Nara. Chadal Gufei, one is to tell us the halacha itself, that a woman who's assaulted, you have to marry her and pay 50 silver coins. And one is to include a mamzeres, and one is to include a woman whom you're with, you get correspondingly. For example, one's sister. Rav Papa says, Besua, Besuos, ha Besuos. It says, in Shemos, it says the word Besula, ha Besulos. And again, the hey extra, and it counts as though it's a 3rd one. So what's the reasoning? Chadal Gufei wanted to tell us that you have to pay the silver coins if this was a woman who you were allowed to marry. V'chad l'chayev helaven, and one is to include a mamzeres. V'chad l'chayev krisus. So both Papa and Reish Lakish derive that you pay the kanas to the mamzeres from the psukim. So the Gemara asks, Rav Papa, my time Reish Lakish, why does Rav Papa derive it from the besua, ha besuos, and not from nara, ha nara? So he says, only buy like Abai. He says, no, we need the words ha nara like Abai. Damar Abai, Baal Mesa Pater. Abai says, and let's say you take her, the father takes you to court, but before the judgment is done, she dies, then you're going to be exempt from paying the kanas because she needs to be alive in order for the kanas to be paid. As it states, when Asan la via na'ara, as he gives to the father of the na'ara, la vi na'ara vo la vi mesa. She has to be alive in that day. And Reish Lakish, my time Amar Papa. Why does Reish Lakish not follow Rav Papa's logic? We're explaining no, because Reish Lakish would say that the word habasulos was needed for Xera Shava, because we compare by Bisua, it says the word shkalim, and by the Nara, it says chamishim kesef. So we don't know what type of kesef that needs to be shkalim, and we don't know by the Pesua how much of it. So therefore, we need to do Gzeira Shava, says Rish Lakish Rav Papa, only by Gzeira Shava. Tanya Kesef Yishkol Kamor Pesuos. Says by the Mefata, they should take money like the more of the Pesuos. And she has Kamor Pesuos, and more Pesuos Kazeh, that both of them, Nahara and the Mefata, they both get 50 shekel. So the Gemara says Rish Lakish. So therefore, you compare the Mefata to the owners. The Gemara asks Rish Lakish, Nami Bala Kadabaye. Rav Papa Nami Bala Gzeira Shava. But doesn't Rish Lakish also require a verse like Abaye that says to teach us that if the Nara dies, the father doesn't collect the money? And doesn't Rav Papa also require like Rish Lakish, like the din of Rish Lakish, that you need to compare the Gzeira Shava to compare the more of the Pesuos to the Mefata to the Arusa. So the Gemara says, you're right. Al Shisa Krai Kasivi. There are 6 verses. One of the 6 verses, Nara Nara Hanara Besua Besuos Ha Besuos. It says Nara Nara Hanara. That's 3. Besua Besua Ha Besuos. That's 6. So what's the purpose of this? Treu Gufayu. 2 of them are intended to teach us about the law of Mefata or Nanusa by a regular kosher Kshera woman. Look at Abaye. One is to teach us like Abaye, the idea of that there's no payment if the Nara is no longer alive. The Chad, Gzeira Shava. One is to teach us like Rish Lakish said, it's Gzeira Shava, that it's 50 silver, 50 shkalim by both the Anusa and the Mefata. And I Yetrui Leitrei. And so then there are 2 left over, 2 extra words. So Chad, Asuye Chayve Lavin, Chad Asuye and Chayve Krisis. One is to tell us that you pay the Knas even by a regular prohibition, and one is to say you pay the Knas even if it's a kares penalty. So that's how the Gemara explains our Mishnah. So the Gemara has a question about this. The Gemara says that our Mishnah, which says that you pay the Knas by both prohibition, that's a regular prohibition, like a case of a mamzeres, and also by a kares, like a case of a man who's with one sister, that in both cases you pay the Knas. Our Mishnah is not like another opinion, like the Mishnah, like the Brisa, like a source of the Brisa. It says that our Mishnah is coming to exclude the position of the following Tana. The Tanya, because we weren't in a Brisa, it says Velo Siel Isha. And in the case of the woman who is an Anusa, it says that he has to marry her. Velo Siel Isha. So Shimon Hatimni Omer, so Shimon Hatimni, or sometimes people pronounce it Timani, but it's really in the Masifta Shas they vocalized it as Timni. So Shimon Hatimni says, Isha Sheyesh by Avaya. So when are you obligated to marry this woman? If the Kedushin is Tovsin, that if you try to marry her, even though it's prohibited, it's a valid marriage. In the case of the Mamzeres, if you try to marry her, it's prohibited, but it's still the marriage is binding. I'll read the Rashi. Fuke Haitana Masnisen, our Mishnah that states Yesh Knas Mamzeres, that there's a Knas for Mamzeres and for his sister that you pay the Knas, is to exclude from the position of the following Brisa, where it states Shimon Hatimni says in order for you to pay the Knas, it has to be a Isha Sheyesh by Avaya. What does Rashi say here? Shekedushin Tovsin Loba, that if he tries to betroth her, it's a valid betrothal. But according to Shimon Hatimni, you wouldn't pay the Knas Prat Rashi Lachosa or Kochayve Krisus. That you wouldn't pay the Knas if it was your sister or anybody else who's Chayav Kares, because we were not in Kedushin. That Reb Shimon Hatimni says She'ein Kedushin Tovsin Bahem, that there's no marriage by them. So that's according to Reb Shimon Hatimni. So therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon HaTimni, we would, according to Shimon HaTimni, we would say that if the woman was your sister, then we're going to say under those circumstances, it's not going to be the kedusha will not be valid, and so therefore you don't pay the kinas. But she would say that it would be a valid marriage with the mamzeres, and so therefore you would pay the kinas to her. So our Mishnah, which says you pay the kinas also by a kares, is not like Shimon HaTimni's position. And Rabbi Shimon ben Asya says, Isha Ru'uyo L'Kaima, not only does it have to be Isha Sheyesh Ba'avaya, but also has to be a woman which is Ru'uyo L'Kaima, which means to say that the marriage is binding, that you're able to remain with her. And so that would exclude not only the achosa, where there's no avaya, but even the mamzeres, because that marriage would not be binding, according to Rav Shimon ben Manasseh. Is not able to remain with it. So as the Gemara says, Ika ben, so my benai, what's the distinction between Shimon HaTimni, who says Isha Ru'uya, Isha Sheyesh Bo Avaya, which excludes the woman who was your sister, and Rav Shimon ben Asya says Isha Ru'uya L'Kaima, that it has to be a woman who the marriage would be able to be enduring. So what does that mean? My benayu, Amar Abzera, Mamzeres or Nesina Ika benayu. The distinction between them is the case of the Mamzeres or the Nesina, because according to Rabbi Shimon HaTimni, that marriage is binding, and so therefore you pay the kinas. Whereas according to Shimon ben Manasseh, you're not allowed to remain in that marriage, and so therefore you don't pay the kinas in that case as well. We'll read it inside. According to Shimon HaTimni, who says that the kedushin are tosein that even though it's a regular prohibition, the kedushin is still valid. It's a valid marriage. So according to such a position, according to Shimon HaTimni, you would have to pay the kinas there. So he says, this is going to last, and you pay the kinas. According to one who says it has to be an Isha, you have to be able to remain with her. You're not allowed to remain in this marriage. So therefore, you're not allowed to remain in this marriage. And so therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, you wouldn't even pay the kinas into a case of a mamzeres. So now the Gemara says, well, Rabbi Akiva the Amar in Kedushin, and according to Rabbi Akiva, who says that when it comes to Chayve Lavin, there's no Kedushin at all. So, because we learned this in the Gemara in Yevamos, that it says that if a person marries a Kohen marries his divorcee, Rabbi Akiva says there's no Kedushin at all. So my benayu. So what's going to be the difference between them? So we'll have to read the Rashi here. Rashi says, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh kaparcha. This is only a question according to the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh. Remember we said that Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says, his position is that in order for there to be the kinas, it has to be on a woman, which means that there's no kinas, even by a situation of a mamzeres. So if that's the case, as Rashi says, the Palagoe to Rabbi Akiva, that we learn in Yevamos, Rabbi Shimon ben Asya argues on Rabbi Akiva in the following scenario: Ezu mamzer, kol she'er basar shehu b'lo yavu. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. So Rabbi Akiva says that what's considered to be a mamzer, any prohibited sexual relationship which is in the category of lo yavo. Whereas Shimon HaTimni says, Kol shechayavin alav kares b'dei shemayim. What creates a mamzer? Only if you're liable for kares from heaven, like we said, the case of your sister. However, Shimon ben Asya ka ba'inan law. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Asya, we're asking the question: Isfir like Rabbi Akiva. If Rabbi Shimon ben Asya holds like like Rabbi Akiva, that from every prohibition there's a category of mamzer that's going to come out. So if Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh holds like Rabbi Akiva, ma'ika be mashmusa desiyah lashon kiyum u'mashmeus Shimon atemani. So he's saying, what's the difference between the mashmaos, between the implication of siyah? So what's the difference between mashmausa the siyah, which is an expression of which Shimon Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh says an expression of being able to remain with her. Mashmaus to Shimon Temani, with to Shimon Temani's implication, where he says it has to be binding, because according to Rabbi Akiva, they're not binding in either case. So inami mashma Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh lashon havaya, even if it had said according to if Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh had said a lashon of havaya, imatale mamzer. According to Shimon Atimani, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh, what would he say is the distinction? Rabbi Akiva says that even Shimon Atimani's distinction is not going to be binding. So what would he say according to Rabbi Akiva? So the Gemara explains. Meaning to say, I'm just saying again, that Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh said the distinction is Isha Ru'uyo L'Kaima, whereas Shimon Timnei said Isha Sheyesh B'Avaya. But according to Rabbi Akiva, there's no distinction that if you're not able to be, if there's no Avaya, then you can't be Mekaima. So if it's the case, why did Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh change from the expression of Shimon Timnei according to Rabbi Akiva, who says, he argues with the Chachamim and says that if there's no Avaya, then the marriage is not binding at all. So the Gemara says, Ika Benayu, according to Shimon ben Manasseh, the difference between them would be an almana or a kohen gadol, a widow who marries a kohen gadol. Rabbi Simai, that's an exception. Tanya Rabbi Simai, Omer, Menakol, Rabbi Akiva Mamzerin, Chutzme almana or kohen gadol. That according to Rabbi Simai, Rabbi Akiva would say everybody's a mamzer except for a widow marries a kohen gadol. Their offspring is not a mamzer. And there is a specific verse, that the kohen gadol is not allowed to marry a widow, so that he's not allowed to take her as a wife, because if he does so, he's going to be mechal his seed, which means that they become non-kohanim, which means that they become chilulin but not mamzerin. And so therefore, now we understand why Rav Shimon ben Manasseh changed the language of Shimon Atimani, and he says only if there's a woman that is Ru'uyo L'Kaima that you're able to remain with her, there's a knas. He's minimizing the case of a Kohen Gadol who assaults a widow. There will not. So in the case of a Kohen Gadol who assaults a widow, then there will not be the knas. However, if he had said the language of Shimon Atimani, he would have included the case of the widow would be able to receive the knas. So that's what the Gemara says is the distinction. And then the Gemara continues and asks, Rabbi Yeshevav, according to Rabbi Yeshevav, here too there's a question of how we pronounce his name, because this is one of the Haruge Malchus, which we're going to read about on Tisha B'Av. So in Gemara Yevamos says his name is Rabbi Yaakov, and it says Yeshevav, because he was the head of the Mishmar in Divrei Hayamim. Anyway, so according to Rabbi Yeshevav or Yeshevav, depending on how to pronounce him, if you say Rabbi Shimon ben Manasseh holds like Rabbi Yeshevav, who argues on Rabbi Simai. Okay, we'll stop here. I'll pick this up, God willing, tomorrow's daf. We'll do Rabbi Yeshevav in tomorrow's daf. We'll stop here for now.